video, I am going to show you how to use a material called bleeding art tissue to make wax resist watercolor art. And so this is what your finished product might look like. I am going to demonstrate the technique for you so you can go ahead and get started making your own. Okay, so in your take and make kit, you should receive a watercolor board that looks like this. You will also get a spray bottle that you should fill with water. Cold water from the tap is fine. You will also get a white crayon and some bleeding tissue squares. You might also want to grab some paper towels, and I will show you why once we get started here. Now, the thing about this art project is that because of the way the tissue bleeds the dye onto the watercolor board, there's no really coloring inside the lines, so to speak. So what you want to do is create a pattern with your white crayon that will look nice when the color is covering the entire surface of your board. So what I'm going to show you is I am going to draw just a couple of fall leaves, and then I'll do some fall colors. I always find it kind of nice when I blend either like all cool colors or all warm colors together. If you've never heard of cool versus warm colors before, cool colors are more like something like this. Blues and purples and pinks sometimes, although pinks can be a warm color as well, but these are all pretty cool. And then warm tones would be like those fall colors like red and orange and yellow and stuff like that. And so those colors tend to blend together really nicely. If you mix too much cool and warm together, sometimes it can get very muddled and have a more like grayed out or brownish kind of tone to it. So I would suggest sticking with either all cool colors or all warm colors, or you can experiment with doing patches of different types of colors around your board. So the first thing you're going to want to do is draw with your white crayon right on the watercolor board here. And it can be kind of hard to see what you're drawing since you're using white on white. But if you tilt your board a little bit as you're going along, sometimes the light will make it easier to see what you're working on. So now for the sake of this video, I'm just going to do like a corner of this board. You're going to end up doing the whole thing, right? So I'm going to start right down in this corner, and I am just going to draw some leaves. Just draw some like nice maple leaves here. And like I said, it can be hard to see what you're making, and in fact you probably can't see at all what I'm drawing right now, but if I tilt this a little bit, I can kind of see where my wax lines are, so I can keep going along here. I just draw some veins in my leaves. We'll do some smaller leaves up here. I just want to get some wax down on the board so I can show you how to use the tissue, all right? And then if you don't want to like draw leaves or anything like that, in the other example I did feathers, you could definitely just do like a pattern, like a swirl could be nice. In fact, maybe I'll draw one on here. Swirl, or you could do just different shapes like squares, triangles, make like a geometric pattern. That might look kind of cool. I'm just going to draw a bunch of random stuff on here so I can show you how it works. All right. And I'll do like a solid circle down here so you can see how that would look once you put the tissue on. And you're going to want to make sure that you get a nice layer of this crayon on your board. Sometimes it helps to go over your drawing a couple times just to make those lines nice and thick and bold and even. Because of the texture of the watercolor board, sometimes it can be like there's little divots in the board that make it a little uneven. So you want to press kind of hard with your crayon and maybe go over it a couple times. All right, so I have put some shapes down on there, and now I'm going to show you how to use the tissue. Now, when you're covering this whole thing, you're going to want to work in batches for this part, and I will show you why. First, I'm going to separate out some colors that I'm going to use, and like I said, I'm going to use some warm fall colors. So I'm going to take out these oranges and reds and yellows and just get a pile going here because you're going to want to work kind of quickly. Maybe I'll throw some brown in here too. Really make it very fall inspired. I love fall. I don't know about you guys, but it is my favorite time of year. I love the chilly autumn weather. Okay, so I think I probably have enough to cover the spot that I just drew on. All right, so step number one now is going to be to spray the area that you want to work on with water. Don't use a ton. You just want to get it damp. You don't want it to be like running water. You know, you don't want like drops dripping down or anything like that. You just want to spray a nice fine mist over the top of your artwork, just like that. All right, and like I said, you don't want to do the whole board at once because what's going to happen is as you start to lay the tissue down after you've already sprayed it, other parts of the board might start to dry and you really want to work with it while it's wet. So I suggest doing just a small part at a time. You can color on the whole thing first with your white crayon, and then when you get to this part where you're going to be putting the tissue down, work with one part at a time, right? So now that I sprayed this and I have a nice pretty even layer of water, I am going to just start placing down my tissue right on top, and you want to make sure that it is pretty much all covered. What I mean by that is you don't want to leave any white spaces unless that's a look that you are going for, which could totally look pretty cool too. But if you want to cover your entire surface with color, like I did in the feather example, then you're going to want to kind of overlap your squares a little bit. And I am also kind of alternating these colors so I don't have a bunch of red next to each other or yellow or brown. I am mixing it up as I go along here. This one here. So you'll see already that it's starting to bleed a little bit, and you might find some dry spots like this corner here. I'm just going to spray a little extra water on there to put my squares down. And it's important that you put the water down first because that's going to let the color of the tissue soak into the board. All right. So I am just going along here, putting my tissue down, and I'll show you what the next step is. Alright, so now that I've covered this part of my board with tissue, the next thing I'm going to do is spray some more water over the top of the tissue. And this is going to kind of speed up that bleeding process so the dye will work its way into the board a little faster. Alright, now the reason why I said you should get some paper towels as well is that even though I just like kind of soaked this quite a bit, you can see how wet that is, I don't want it to be totally pooling water on top because that's going to make my board warp a little bit. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a paper towel and I'm just going to gently put it on the top so it can soak up a little bit of that extra water and color. Just like that. And I'm not even going to press down with it, I'm just going to let it soak up any extra, right? Okay, so now what you would do is you would move on to the next part of your board that you want to cover with color, and work your way around until you are completely done putting tissue over the entire thing. So for this video, I'm just doing this corner so I could show you what it looks like. And we're gonna now let it sit for about 5 to 10 minutes to let it dry a little bit. You don't wanna pull this off when it's still soaking wet. Yeah, that's the next step, is we are going to actually remove the tissue to see the color underneath. All right, so we're gonna let this sit for a few minutes and then I will show you what the next step is. All right, so it's been about 5 minutes or so and this has dried a little bit. So I'm going to show you what we're gonna do next. Now you might want to put on the gloves that I put in your kit too, for this part, if you care about kind of getting color on your fingers. It does wash off, but it can be a little tricky to scrub it all off. So if you want to, you can put those gloves on for this next step. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just start peeling off the tissue squares to reveal what is underneath. And it's going to have a really cool watercolor tie-dye kind of effect. And you will start to see those shapes and lines that you drew. And you're also going to notice a lot of patches where the color might not have soaked into the board. And that's okay, because I'm going to show you how we will fix that. And one way is you can kind of actually swipe the squares as you pick them up to fill in those patches. But I'm going to kind of just pull everything off and then show you what we would do to fix that spot next. All right, so here I go pulling off all of these tissue squares. All right, so with this last one, I'm just kind of swiping around up here. You can see the leaves I drew, and there's a square and a triangle and a big leaf down here. This area down here really didn't get a lot of the color, and that's fine. When you're using the spray bottle, sometimes it can be pretty uneven when you're applying the water, which is fine. So how we're gonna fix it is we're gonna just spray it again, and that alone will start to bleed the color more. But I'm actually going to apply some more tissue squares right on top again to cover those spots that can use a little bit more color. And now I've sprayed it again, so I know that it's nice and wet in those particular spots that are missing color. And I'm going to continue to do that. And this is where your board might start to warp a little bit. You can see mine is like starting to bubble up a little bit, and that's fine. Because when it's dry, you can actually just set like a bunch of books on top or something like that to flatten it back out again. So remember to spray over the top of the tissue once you have it on there. All right, I'll put this one here. Okay, and then let's see, where else can I use some more color? Right here. Some red on there. And the nice thing about this is because it's watercolors and it all blends so nicely, you don't really have to worry about matching the color underneath with the new square that you put on top, because as you can see with what I'm doing right now, all of these warm colors just blend together really nicely. All right, we're gonna let that one live right there. And let's put another one right here too. Make sure too that when you're doing this project, you put paper towel underneath, and you're not setting these tissues down directly onto your table or anything, because it might get the color on the tabletop. We don't want that, right? Okay, so I am going to again just kind of lightly dab the top of this so that I can get that extra water off of there. And let it soak into the board underneath. And we're going to let it dry again for about another 5 minutes. All right, so this has been drying for about another 5 minutes, and I am going to pull off these new squares that I put on to fill in the blank spots that were left from our first round of tissue. And you can see this covered up those spots nicely. Keep pulling this off. And sometimes when you have like a darker square that you put a lighter square over, you'll get this effect here, which I actually kind of like. You can see that in a few spots on here as well. Kind of gives it a cool effect, right? All right, so we're gonna pull all of these new squares off of here. And if you get a little bit of pooling like this, what you could do is just peel off your tissue and swipe it to even it out nicely like that. Perfect. All right, I'm just gonna pull the rest of these off. All right, so there we have it. You can see too, like in this wonky looking leaf that I drew, the parts that I went over a second time with the white crayon are a lot bolder than like this area up here where I just did a quick once over. So that's really why you want to either press really hard with the crayon or go over it a couple times because it'll really fill in that line and make sure that it resists that watercolor from hitting the board and soaking in, right? Because you can see this looks a little bit grainy over here, but this side is a lot cleaner, right? So that's it, that's all you have to do. Now what you'll want is to let your board dry completely, and if it gets a little bit warped because of the dampness of the water, then you can put some books on top and leave it for a couple days to flatten out. That will help it stay straighter, okay? Okay, that's all for this project. I hope you enjoy making your wax resist tissue watercolor art. And as always, I would love to see your creations. You can share them with us on our teen Instagram at MCPLTeens. You can send it to us so we can see. All right, have a good day. Bye.